Welcome back to Outlaw Operations, where every tale drags you deeper into the darkness. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of a haunting story tangled in deception, greed, and betrayal, born from dreams and passion, yet shattered by heartbreak. Before we jump in, a massive thank you to all our incredible subscribers and viewers. Your support fuels everything we do. But here's something to think about: nearly 97% of you are watching without hitting that subscribe button. So, why stay on the sidelines? Join our Outlaw family, smash that subscribe button and become part of the journey. Now, get comfortable, because this is one story that will grip you till the very end. They had long suspected something about him, an uneasy feeling that clung like smoke to his name whenever Amber's case came up. But they didn't act on instinct. Instead, they handed the file over quietly, sliding it across departments like it carried poison. The ones who had been investigating Amber's disappearance for over a year took it from there. The puzzle was complex, the pieces jagged. But the search for Chelsea King reignited a fury within the investigation. 5 days after she vanished, on a gray and windy March 2, 2010, they found her. Her body lay beneath a thin layer of soil, just off the southeast shore of Lake Hodges. A shallow grave. The kind a person digs in haste, with guilt and panic clawing at their spine. She had been raped. Strangled. Her body cold and broken by the water. They found male DNA on her, John Gardner's. Now the darkness had a name. And a face. The arrest came quickly. With Chelsea's blood still whispering the truth from the grave, the police charged John with her murder. And the attempted rape of another girl, Candace. But one piece still floated just out of reach: Amber. Her name lingered in the air like unfinished business. The investigators pressed in harder, tightening their grip on John's quiet world. He began to feel it, how time was running out, how the lies were collapsing. His lawyer whispered the cold, practical truth: make a deal, give them something, maybe buy yourself a little mercy. Just a little. And so, John offered them a secret. The location of Amber's body. But he demanded silence in return. He didn't want that fact used in court. He wanted to trade her grave for less pain. And they agreed. They followed his instructions to a forgotten patch of earth in Poway, not far from an old, rusted water tower where the search dogs had once barked with suspicion. He pointed. Said nothing. Just nodded to the dirt. They dug slowly, solemnly, until a smell hit the air, a smell of death, and time, and sorrow. Beneath the ground, they found the remains. It was Amber. Dental records confirmed it. Her small body had long since surrendered to decay. Her face, once alive with the light of a teenage dream, was now just bone and silence. But because of the deal, they couldn't speak the truth aloud. Couldn't tell the world that he had led them there. Couldn't officially tie her death to him. Amber's family shattered. A cruel twist of justice had denied them closure. For so long they had clung to hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, Amber would walk through the door again. That she'd call. That her laughter hadn't been swallowed by the dark. But now, there was only a grave. They stared at the man responsible. The man who would never be held accountable for what he did to their daughter. And rage filled them. Chelsea's family felt that same emptiness, the kind that never really leaves. But at least they got a verdict. John was convicted for Chelsea's murder. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The prosecutors pushed hard, built their case on blood, bone, and DNA. They wanted him gone forever. Death penalty. They said the evidence left no doubt. But Amber's murder? That chapter still floated in limbo. Eventually, both families sat down with the prosecution. A deal was proposed. A guilty plea, 2 murders, 1 predator. In return, no death penalty. Just life behind bars, without parole. It would spare the families the circus of a trial and the torment of appeals. John considered it. Then, something strange happened. Amber's mother asked to see him. They met in the sterile cold of a hospital room, the air thick with tension and grief. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just listened. He spoke with a dead voice. He told her how he saw Amber that morning, just a 14-year-old girl, pretty and innocent, taking a detour from her usual route to meet a friend. He followed her. Pulled up beside her. Showed her a gun. She froze. He forced her into his car, drove her to a hidden place where no one would hear her scream. There, he raped her. She begged for her life, but he ignored her cries. His hands closed around her throat like a vice. Her voice fell silent. And then, he buried her. Like she was nothing. Amber's mother stood. Her face pale. Her hands trembling. She said nothing. What was there to say? The man in front of her had destroyed everything. And yet, he sat there breathing. She walked away. In time, the weight of suspicion that had once fallen on Dave, Amber's friend and the last one to see her, was lifted. She had blamed him. She had wanted someone to blame. But she had been wrong. He forgave her, quietly, without anger. The families buried their daughters. Graves were dug. Names etched into stone. Tears spilled like rivers that never dried. In May 2010, John Gardner was sentenced. 2 life terms. No chance of parole. Plus 25 more years for Candace. The courtroom was heavy with relief and rage. He said he felt guilty. That he was sorry. But it was too late. He began to unravel in prison, mentally and emotionally. Sought help. Broke down. But nothing could wash the blood from his hands. Years passed. Amber's mother found her own way to forgiveness. It didn't come easy. It came like a slow thaw, bit by bit, until one day she could breathe again. She forgave him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. The case left a scar on society. But from that scar came change. Laws were rewritten. Penalties for sexual offenders stiffened. Parole conditions became more stringent. The system shifted, too late for some, but in time for others. And still, in the quiet spaces of memory, Chelsea and Amber live on. 2 young girls swallowed by the darkness. But never forgotten. Not by their families. Not by the world. Not by those of us who listen to their stories, and remember. Andrea always seemed to carry a light within her, the kind of quiet brightness that made others feel seen. Raised in a home where values mattered more than appearances, she grew up compassionate, sharp-witted, and endlessly curious. Her mother, in particular, was her anchor, her guide, and her best friend. They shared secrets, laughter, and sometimes, silent tears when things felt too heavy to say aloud. By the time Andrea reached high school, she was thriving. Museums were her safe place. She'd spend hours walking the aisles, losing herself in oil paintings and broken sculptures that whispered stories of the past. She played sports, excelled in her studies, and was the kind of girl neighbors pointed to when they spoke of bright futures. Her family traveled often, long road trips through dusty highways, quick getaways to coastal towns. Each journey stretched her world a little wider, taught her how to read people, how to trust instincts sharpened by unfamiliar places. She was her parents' pride. Their bright star. When the time came for college, she applied widely, schools scattered across the map. Her parents dreamed of her joining her older brother in Chicago. For a while, Andrea did too. But when UCLA responded with an offer from their prestigious psychology department, something shifted. Maybe it was the sun-drenched promise of Los Angeles. Maybe it was the thrill of being on her own. Whatever it was, she accepted. Her parents supported her, even if the distance worried them. Her brother wouldn't be nearby anymore. She'd have to navigate everything alone. The move was a whirlwind. New city, new people, new rules. She joined a student club early on, one that promised lifelong friendships and a sense of belonging. To be accepted, she had to pass a quirky little test and pitch in a small donation. Nothing serious. But what drew her in was the warmth of the community, doors left unlocked, people laughing at all hours, the illusion of safety in togetherness. Andrea fit in effortlessly. Her fashion sense was sharp and unique, she turned heads without trying. At parties, she was the quiet center of attention, never the loudest, but the one everyone noticed. Yet she never let any of it distract her. She kept her grades up and worked part-time jobs, never staying too long at one place, always seeking that perfect balance between independence and control. She graduated in 2015, just as she dreamed. The plan was to travel, breathe after years of structure. But first, her senior year had one more chapter to finish. She moved into a dorm just 5 minutes from campus, an old building that creaked when the wind blew too hard. It hosted countless sorority parties, university events, and whispered stories no one fully remembered. Andrea shared the space with her closest sorority sisters and a tiny rescue dog, a shivering little thing with sad eyes that she loved like family. She posted pictures of it constantly, filling her social media with its daily adventures. It was the one constant in her life that never asked for anything in return. One day, the dog went missing. Andrea was inconsolable. She tore through the dorms, checked every corner of campus, called out until her voice cracked. 5 days passed before someone found the dog. Alive. Shaken. Thin. But home. Fall semester loomed. Classes were to begin officially on the 21st of September, but students were already returning. On the 19th, Andrea posted a music video, one of her all-time favorites, a soft melody tinged with sadness. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. September 20th. It was a warm night. The last of summer clung to the air like a ghost refusing to leave. Most of the club members were back, lounging on the apartment balcony, laughing into the night. Andrea stayed late with her friend Jessica at a club activity that ended around 3 a.m. Jessica went to her room. Andrea, not ready to sleep, curled up on the living room couch. No one really knows what happened after that. Around 5 a.m., Samantha, a neighbor in the dorm, burst through the hallway screaming. There was smoke. Flames. Panic. Andrea's door was closed, odd, because she always left it open. Always. Samantha tried to open it. Locked. She screamed for help. More girls came running. Together, they forced the door open. The smoke hit them like a wave. Heat roared in their faces. Inside, they saw Andrea, lying on the bed, unmoving. But the fire was growing. Too dangerous. They had to leave. They called emergency services. 9 frantic calls in under 5 minutes. Fire trucks arrived. 32 firefighters battled the blaze that had swallowed the second floor. By morning, the building stood charred and hollow. The heart of it, Andrea's room, was blackened beyond recognition. Rumors spread like embers in the wind. Andrea hadn't escaped. No one had seen her leave. Whispers became certainty. She was gone. When the fire department finally entered the room, they found a body, a woman, burned beyond recognition. Her face was unidentifiable. Her hands too damaged for fingerprints. But she lay exactly where Andrea had last been seen. The small dog, her beloved shadow, was found at the foot of the bed. Still breathing. Barely. Firefighters tried, but the wounds were too severe. He was euthanized later that day. The university relocated the dorm students. Security was tightened. Locks changed. Lights installed. But something deeper shifted, a heaviness that crept through the halls, a fear no keycard could protect against. No one could explain why Andrea never got up. Why she didn't run. Why she stayed. And then came the rumors, darker ones. That she had been seen sleepwalking before. That strange figures had been glimpsed in the dorm late at night. That the fire didn't start from faulty wiring, but from something else. Some said they heard her talking in her sleep weeks before, whispering to someone who wasn't there. Others claimed the dog barked at shadows. Always at the same corner of her room. Some even said the building had a history, a fire decades ago, another girl who died in the same room. Officially, the cause of the fire was never fully determined. An accident, they said. That's what they always say. But her friends never stopped wondering, not about the fire, but about the look on her face in those final moments. Witnesses swore they saw her eyes open through the smoke, staring into something none of them could see. And on some nights, when the wind rattles the new dorm's windows just right, girls swear they still hear soft footsteps down the hall. And sometimes, a dog's whimper. But Andrea never had a dog, they remind themselves. Not anymore. No one knows the exact moment Andrea stopped breathing, whether it was the fire that stole the last of her breath, or if death had already crept in before the flames ever touched her skin. There were whispers later, rumors really, that she might have passed out from carbon monoxide, or maybe she was already gone before the smoke even started to rise. Whatever the truth, it was too late by the time anyone came looking. Her parents had just returned to Austin, relaxed and unaware, their trip marked by photos, souvenirs, and a long list of stories to share. But something didn't feel right. Andrea always called. She always checked in. But now, silence. Texts unread. Calls straight to voicemail. That gnawing feeling grew with each hour. Her mother's instinct kicked in, restless and shaking, until she called a neighbor in Los Angeles, someone who lived near Andrea's dorm. The voice on the other end hesitated. Then a sentence changed everything. There was a fire. I think it was her building. Panic blurred everything after that. Flights were booked, bags thrown together with trembling hands, prayers muttered between sobs. They didn't even know if it was her. The police hadn't confirmed the identity of the body they pulled from the apartment. But a mother always knows. Something inside her cracked that night. Back in Los Angeles, the investigation had already started. Officers were moving in and out of the scene like shadows. The last known person to speak with Andrea was her next-door neighbor, Jessica. They'd been close, sometimes sharing meals, laundry detergent, late-night secrets. But when police asked Jessica what she remembered, her answers felt rehearsed. Distant. Cold. She said she didn't hear anything. Didn't see anything. Didn't smell smoke until it was too late. Claimed she had no idea what started the fire. That was odd. Jessica was always nosy. She noticed everything. Yet now, she was blind to it all. Other girls from the dorm, members of Andrea's close-knit sorority, offered a gentler theory. Maybe Andrea had fallen asleep with one of her scented candles burning, something she did often to soothe herself after long days. They insisted she wasn't the type to hurt anyone, and certainly no one would ever want to hurt her. But nothing added up. Investigators began examining every corner of the room. Appliances were untouched. No faulty wiring. No electrical sparks. And strangely, no candles were found anywhere, not even the remnants of one. What did stand out, however, was the metal trash can sitting suspiciously close to the head of her bed. That wasn't where she kept it. Her friends confirmed it always sat on the far side of the room, near the window. But the fire had started right there, at the head of the bed. And the trash can? It was melted and charred, too damaged to make sense of. They couldn't tell what had been inside. It would take a forensic chemical analysis to understand what burned that hot, that fast. 2 hours after the flames were out, forensic arson specialists arrived. They didn't need long. The pattern of the burn, the intensity, it was all wrong for an accident. It was intentional. Someone had used accelerant. Probably poured it straight into the metal trash can, set it ablaze, and let it take the rest. Then they saw the blood. Even through the black soot and melted fabric, red stains clung to the mattress, the walls, the floor. Blood had spattered wildly, enough to make the hair on the back of the lead investigator's neck rise. It hadn't just been fire. Andrea had bled. A lot. And she never screamed. Neighbors later admitted they had tried to reach her, knocking on her door after smelling smoke, calling out as the fire alarms wailed. But there was no response. She was lying still, too still. Some began to fear what the police were already thinking: Andrea might have been dead before the fire was lit. Whoever did this, didn't just want to kill her. They wanted her to disappear. The timeline started coming together. It was somewhere between 5:30 and 6 a.m. when things began to unravel. Andrea's roommate, Samantha, had seen her last. She'd gotten up early to prepare for her on-campus job and found Andrea sleeping peacefully on the couch in the living room. She left around 5:50. When she came back roughly 40 minutes later, Andrea wasn't there. The door to her bedroom was closed, something she rarely did. Andrea liked sleeping with the door open, claiming she felt less alone. But not this time. It was shut. Locked in. Then came another strange piece of the puzzle. Sarah, a student who lived directly above Andrea's apartment, had returned home just before 5:30 a.m. She'd dropped her boyfriend at the airport and was unlocking her door when she noticed a man standing outside Andrea's building. Not just standing, lingering. Watching. She described him as wearing a black baseball cap pulled low, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. At first, she thought nothing of it. Boys visited the dorms all the time. But when he saw her looking, he bolted. Vanished into the shadows. Her gut twisted. She locked her door and immediately texted her boyfriend, explaining what she'd seen. He brushed it off, probably just some guy sneaking out after spending the night. Still, something didn't feel right. Then, just after 6:15, Sarah heard it. A scream, sharp and full of terror, ripped through the early morning silence, followed by frantic barking from the dog in Andrea's apartment. The dog had never barked before. Always calm. Always quiet. But now it howled as though it knew something monstrous had happened. Sarah called 911, her voice shaking, but dispatch didn't seem too concerned. The area had a reputation for rowdy students, noisy parties, false alarms. Still, a patrol unit was sent out. They arrived at 6:23 a.m., flashed their lights through the building, saw nothing unusual, and left minutes later. No one followed up with Sarah. No one knocked on Andrea's door. No one checked the room where the dog barked, where the fire had only just begun to smolder. The chance to stop it had slipped by. And the man in the cap. He was gone. Now, all that's left are broken timelines, a mother's cry echoing through the hallway, and the smell of charred memories clinging to the walls. Something evil walked through that dorm. It didn't just kill a girl, it silenced her, erased her, tried to burn away her truth. But it left blood behind. And blood always tells a story. The streetlights flickered outside Andrea's building that night, casting shaky shadows on the windows. A patrol car crawled past, its headlights sweeping lazily across her second-story room. Inside, the curtains fluttered slightly, but the officers didn't stop. They didn't knock. They didn't ask questions. From the sidewalk, everything looked fine. Maybe a party gone too far, maybe a drunk student, maybe someone's dog barking over spilled wine and stupid arguments. They assumed it was nothing. And they left. Sarah, one floor up, hadn't slept. Something gnawed at her gut. She'd been watching the street, her fingers frozen around her phone. She had tried calling Andrea. Again. And again. No answer. She even tried knocking on a few other doors in the building, whispering calls to the other girls. But silence hung heavy in every hallway. Everyone seemed to be asleep, except her. Then, not long after the flashing blue and red lights vanished into the night, she heard it. A loud, dull bang. Like a heavy object falling. Or a door being kicked open. The clock had just turned 6:45 a.m. when Sarah sprinted to the balcony. A thick pillar of smoke curled upward from the apartment below. She squinted. Someone, a man, leapt from the balcony below hers. He wore a black and white t-shirt, and he was running. Fast. Panic rose like bile in Sarah's throat. Something had happened to Andrea. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Then she ran. Down the stairs, past confused students in robes and bare feet, past the smoke now pouring from under Andrea's door. A small group was trying to force it open. Some were yelling her name, others crying. No one was answering from the other side. Sarah didn't wait. She burst out the front entrance and spotted the man sprinting down the street. Her feet hit the pavement. She ran after him, screaming. He didn't look back. A red Nissan was parked a block away. He jumped inside, slammed the door, and peeled off. But Sarah saw it. A fraternity sticker in the rear window. That detail burned into her memory. Back inside the building, Andrea's friends finally got the door open. The heat nearly knocked them back. Flames licked at the bed frame. Her body was there, motionless, barely visible through the smoke. Blood pooled on her neck, chest, and shoulders. They ran. The fire spread quickly. Sirens returned, too late. The red Nissan was gone. Sarah, breathless and shaking, pointed the direction it vanished in. But none of Andrea's friends could think of anyone who'd want to hurt her. She wasn't dating anyone. She was focused, kind, funny. She didn't have enemies. Not the kind that killed. Nothing was stolen from the room. No signs of robbery. But there were whispers, maybe she met someone online. A Tinder date. Maybe it went wrong. But no messages, no calls, no screenshots surfaced. Nothing concrete. The security footage was useless. Blurry shadows. Too grainy to identify anything or anyone. But the red Nissan with the fraternity sticker became a focal point. Police canvassed the area, interviewed students, knocked on fraternity house doors, pulled parking records. Then Nicholas and Mohair came forward. They lived nearby. That same night, someone broke into their apartment. Laptops, speakers, gone. And one more thing, the keys to a red Nissan. It connected the dots. Days passed. The smell of smoke still lingered on the walls. Then came the confirmation no one wanted. The charred remains found in the room were Andrea's. She was only 21. The autopsy was brutal. She had been wearing only a sports bra when she died. Her hair had been nearly burned off. Her body was scorched, over 90% covered in burns. But the blood loss told a different story. Multiple stab wounds. Deep, violent. 5 on the right side of her neck. 2 on the left. 19 total. And the clincher, she had no soot in her lungs. No carbon monoxide. She was already dead when the fire began. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. The mood on campus darkened. Fear spread. Anyone could be next. A break came when a laptop and speaker, traced through serial numbers, were found in Fresno. That's over 3 hours away. The man who had them. His name was Joseph. He swore innocence. Said they belonged to his roommate. That he was just holding on to them. His roommate? Alberto Medina. When police found Alberto, the trail took a strange turn. At first, his story was jumbled, drunk memories and excuses. He said he went to a concert with his friend Eric Marquez. A few parties. Too much alcohol. The usual. He said he found the electronics. Didn't know who they belonged to. But then the inconsistencies piled up. And under pressure, Alberto cracked. He admitted they stole the items. Claimed it was random. That they didn't mean to hurt anyone. Then things got darker. Alberto described a man who had supposedly attacked them while they were carrying the stolen goods. A man with a gun. Dressed in dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt. He said the man fired at them and missed. The description matched what Sarah had seen. But police weren't buying it. His story twisted every time he told it. Then he said something else. He mentioned Andrea. He said Eric had met her at a party. That she was beautiful. Blonde. Eric had planned to hook up with her. He recalled how Eric came back early that morning. Shaken. Pale. He told Alberto they needed to leave. Now. That something bad had happened. He said Eric told him he hit her. The moment hung heavy in the room when Alberto said it. Cold. Raw. Real. Investigators zeroed in on Eric Marquez. 5 days after the murder, police were closing in. But Andrea's voice, her final moments, were already buried beneath smoke and blood. The horror she endured, the violence that took her life, the way her body was left to burn, it didn't begin with fire. It began with trust. A night out. A stranger's smile. A door unlocked. And it ended with silence. The kind that still echoes through the hallways. The kind that makes people double-check locks, glance over shoulders, and wonder, how well do we really know anyone? The rain had been falling for hours, a soft, persistent whisper against the city's pulse. Hidden behind the wet silence of the early morning, something unspeakable unfolded just blocks from campus. Andrea hadn't answered her phone in hours. Sarah, her best friend, had tried everything, texts, calls, even a few voice messages. Nothing. Just silence. A silence that would soon grow unbearable. By the time the police took Sarah seriously, it was already too late. When investigators began combing through Andrea's dormitory, a new name surfaced, Eric Marquez. 22 years old, clean record, 5th-year med student. On paper, Eric looked like the kind of person who'd help save lives, not take them. Polite. Soft-spoken. Calm. But in the shadows of this investigation, calm began to look a lot like calculated. Eric lived just 5 minutes from the scene. Too close. His friend, Alberto Medina, was the one who first led the police to him. When detectives arrived, Eric didn't flinch. Said he'd spent the weekend drinking, barely left the apartment. His alibi was tight, or so it seemed. Surveillance footage from their building showed something else entirely. From 3 to 8 a.m., the cameras captured both Eric and Alberto moving in and out of the building. At 4 a.m., they vanished for nearly 3 hours. When they returned, it was Alberto who stood out. The red blanket wrapped around him wasn't his. It was Andrea's. The time? 7:11 a.m., right when the fire started. Her room had burned, but the fire hadn't hidden the truth. It had just delayed it. Then came the car, a red Nissan, caught by another camera, matching the one Sarah had described. At 7:30 a.m., the footage showed Alberto shirtless, Eric in fresh clothes, both tossing out trash in black plastic bags like it was just another Sunday morning. But that trash told a different story. It reeked of blood, smoke, and secrets. The search of their apartment revealed everything the fire couldn't destroy: a trash bag filled with bloody clothes, Andrea's underwear, a black sock, the twin of one found in the car. And inside the closet, a bloodied knife, and a blanket, missing from Andrea's room. Alberto's hands bore fresh abrasions. Eric's were clean. Too clean. When confronted, Eric claimed he remembered nothing. The silence returned, cold and hollow, like the one that had followed Andrea's last scream. On September 28, charges were filed: murder, burglary, and arson. Alberto faced additional charges. Both pleaded not guilty. Their families couldn't believe it, refused to. Mothers cried. Fathers demanded answers. No one wanted to believe their sons could do this. And then Joseph Garcia came forward. He had Andrea's stolen laptop and speakers. When pressed, he told them what he'd seen. Alberto and Eric returning home, blood on their clothes, panic in their eyes. Alberto had confessed to him in a hushed, trembling voice, the kind that knew it had crossed a line it could never return from. He had followed Andrea. Waited. Watched. When she returned from walking her dog, he slipped inside her dorm room. Took a kitchen knife. Locked the door. Forced himself on her. When she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her until the life drained from her eyes. Then he lit the fire. To erase her. To make her vanish. He threatened Joseph to stay quiet. But horror like that can't be buried forever. It leaks. It stains everything it touches. DNA tests confirmed what the blood had already confessed: Andrea's blood was on the car, on the clothes, in the apartment. The horror had a name now. Julio, the janitor, had seen them too. He watched Alberto climb out of the red Nissan, a black and white t-shirt clinging to his back, a serpent tattoo wrapping down his arm. They said they were going to help Andrea. Said she needed them. She never did. Police finally admitted their failure. Sarah had warned them. She called. She begged. They ignored her. Andrea might have still been alive. The LAPD suspended the officers involved. An internal investigation followed. The truth came out, but not before it cost a young woman her life. In the fall of 2016, the trials began. Eric stood before the court, his eyes empty, his words mechanical. He pleaded guilty to being an accessory. The judge gave him 2 years and 8 months. He hadn't stabbed Andrea. He hadn't set the fire. He had stayed in the car. But he had done nothing to stop it. Then came Alberto's turn. May 15, 2018. 5 charges. 5 nightmares. The prosecution offered him a deal. Life in prison, no death penalty. He refused. He wanted to fight. Wanted to pretend he wasn't the monster the evidence said he was. But by May 24th, the weight was too much. He crumbled. Admitted everything. First-degree murder. Arson. Animal cruelty. Burglary. The court gave him life without parole. An extra 12 years for good measure. The horror was over, but the scars it left behind would never heal. Andrea's room still smells like burnt fabric and broken dreams. Her dog, once a lively little companion, survived, but with burns that told their own story. Her parents buried her on a quiet morning, the sky a shade of gray that never seemed to lift. There was no justice, not really. Just punishment. And even that felt too quiet. Somewhere in the silence, if you listen closely enough, you might still hear Andrea's voice. Or maybe it's just the wind moving through the empty dormitory halls. Either way, the story lingers. Like smoke. Like ash. Like something that refuses to die. It had only been 2 months since Emma and her new partner, Tor, moved into the quiet suburban home on the edge of town. The house had an old charm, creaking floors, a wraparound porch, and thick woods nearby that swallowed the sunlight after dusk. It seemed like a fresh start. A safe haven. A place where broken pieces could be put back together. Emma, a mother of 2, Max, a bright-eyed 6-year-old, and Saga, her gentle 3-year-old daughter, had found in Tor what many dream of but few discover. He wasn't their biological father, but you wouldn't know it by the way he held them, taught them, kissed their foreheads at night. He loved them like they were his own. In him, Emma seemed to find safety, stability, and maybe, finally, peace. Nicholas, the biological father of the kids, remained present, though distant. He called regularly, mostly to speak with Max and Saga. His relationship with Emma had frayed into a fragile civility, stitched together by custody agreements, financial obligations, and cold, one-word replies. On the evening of the incident, things were deceptively normal. Dinner was early. Emma had just set the table, placing Max's favorite plate with cartoon dinosaurs in front of him, while Saga hummed softly in her seat. Tor wasn't home yet, working late, he had messaged, but he promised he'd be back before the kids went to bed. As the children ate, Emma sent a few messages to her sister through her phone, sharing snippets of her day and asking about her niece's upcoming birthday. It was a light, normal conversation, until it wasn't. At exactly 7:07 p.m., her sister received a final half-sentence. Then silence. No reply. No typing bubbles. No read receipts. Just, nothing. It was unlike Emma, who was always quick to respond. At first, her sister assumed the kids had distracted her, or perhaps Tor had arrived and pulled her into conversation. But something didn't feel right. A chill crept down her spine as the minutes passed. She called Tor. He answered, calm, casual. He was already walking home, earlier than planned, and promised to check in as soon as he got there. At 7:17 p.m., Tor arrived. The house looked undisturbed from the outside. Porch light glowing. A faint breeze rustling the trees. But the front door, it was wide open. Emma always locked the door. Always. The unease that washed over Tor then would haunt him for years to come. He stepped inside and was immediately struck by chaos. The hallway looked like a tornado had ripped through it. Toys and books littered the floor, chairs overturned, a picture frame shattered in the corner. At first, he thought, hoped, it was the kids playing rough. But this was different. It felt violent. It smelled violent. The air had a weight to it, like fear had thickened the oxygen itself. He called out their names. Nothing. Then, at the end of the hallway, just before the living room, he saw a figure on the floor. Small. Still. Max. His body twisted unnaturally, blood trailing from deep cuts on his face and head. Just beside him lay Emma, her hair matted with blood, her body trembling faintly. Tor's scream echoed through the halls as he dropped to his knees. At 7:20 p.m., he called emergency services, his voice barely coherent through the panic. In the background, a woman's faint moans could be heard. When the paramedics arrived, they were met with a house that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. 3 victims, all alive, but barely. Emma, Max, and little Saga had suffered horrifying head trauma. The children were unrecognizable. Emma was covered in her own blood, her body bruised and battered. The emergency team rushed them to the hospital. Saga, barely 3, was fighting harder than anyone should have to. Max slipped in and out of consciousness. Emma was placed into a medically induced coma. The doctors worked tirelessly, but even if they survived, the damage done to their brains would change their lives forever. The crime scene was chaotic. The medical response team, in their urgency, had unintentionally disturbed critical evidence. Items were moved. Blood trails were blurred. What remained, however, told a story of rage. The attack had occurred within a narrow 13-minute window, between the last message at 7:07 and Tor's arrival at 7:17. The timing was everything. At first, suspicion fell on Tor. Naturally, he was the closest. But surveillance footage showed him on the street, walking home during the time of the attack. His alibi was airtight. Still, police took him in again, hoping he'd remember something, anything, out of place. He said no. No strangers. No strange cars. Nothing except the door. That unlocked door. Emma's ex-husband Nicholas quickly became the next focus. There had been tension between him and Emma, fights over money, over time with the kids. She'd even filed a police report after he threatened her once. That was months ago, though. Eventually, they had settled into a brittle peace. Still, the nature of the attack spoke volumes. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen. It was personal. Brutal. Filled with venom. Nicholas was arrested and brought in for questioning. He acted stunned, maybe even genuinely so, but remained calm. He told detectives he had been out of town. Another city, another timeline. His alibi hadn't been confirmed yet, but his demeanor didn't scream guilt. With Nicholas in limbo and no other suspects in sight, police were left grasping for answers. Only one person might hold the key to what happened in those blood-soaked minutes. Saga. 3 years old. Still in the hospital. Still unconscious. Still fighting. And if she wakes up, if her brain allows her to remember anything at all, she may be the only one who knows who walked through that unlocked door. And why they came to kill. Saga was barely holding on to life, a fragile thread between this world and the next. She lay in her hospital bed, unresponsive, a tangled mass of wires and machines breathing for her. The doctors had little hope. If she survived, they warned, she might never walk again, might never remember what had happened inside that house of horrors. But the police needed her. She was their only living witness. The only one who might know the face of the monster who had shattered her life and taken others. Her family didn't leave her side, but they lived in fear that the nightmare wasn't over. That the attacker, whoever it was, might come back to silence her for good. So the hospital was locked down. Armed guards stood outside her door. No one got in or out without clearance. But fear still seeped through the sterile walls, thick as smoke. The neighborhood where it happened was quiet. Too quiet. No one heard screams. No one saw anything. Or so they claimed. The police found themselves staring at dead ends, forcing them to sift through surveillance footage, comb through every second, hoping for a face, a silhouette, a shadow, anything. They sent officers to scour the nearby streets, search dogs sniffing through garbage, gutters, ditches. They were desperate to find the murder weapon. A hammer. Or something like it. Whatever it was, it had crushed bone. Shattered tiny skulls. Each child had been struck again and again, long after the first blow would have been fatal. The violence wasn't just murder. It was rage, pure and unfiltered. And yet, there was no sign of forced entry. No valuables taken. Nothing touched, except for the bodies. That told the police everything they needed to know, it wasn't a robbery. It was personal. But who could hate this family enough to do that? They were kind, quiet, well-liked. No ties to crime, no enemies. Just a mother, a father, their children. A home filled with laughter, until it wasn't. Nicholas, a friend of the family, was briefly held, but his alibi checked out. He was released. And the investigation stalled. Emma, Saga's mother, was still in a coma. Still unable to say a word. The media clung to every development. The entire town held its breath. Then a single thread unraveled. A local man came forward. He told police about someone he saw near the house on the night of the murders. A figure in black. Hooded. Standing at the door, hesitating. It was just past 7 p.m. When he returned minutes later, the man was gone, but another figure, thinner, frail, dressed in black, bolted from the house and sped off in a car. The witness couldn't make out the face, but something seemed wrong. He thought, strangely, that the driver might have been a woman disguised as a man. More neighbors eventually came forward. Different voices, the same description, a black-clad figure lurking. Watching. Waiting. Then came a chilling lead. A man approached the police with a name, his ex-girlfriend, Christina Schur. She'd been acting strangely. Erratic. Dark. Dangerous. Christina, 31, had lived a fragmented life, drifting from place to place like a ghost never settling. Born in Hanover, her father vanished when she was just a child. She moved to New York, then to Göttingen, then Greece, each new city another chapter in her unraveling. In 2006, she met Tor, a young trader vacationing in Crete. What started as a whirlwind romance turned quickly into obsession. She followed him to Sweden. When he ended things, she refused to let go. Emails. Messages. Uninvited visits. Pleas. Threats. Then she tried to end her life near a remote castle, an overdose, alone in the cold. Tor found her and, out of pity, let her stay. He contacted her family, desperate to get her help. Christina was admitted to a psychiatric clinic in Germany. But the treatment didn't hold. By that summer, she was back in Stockholm. Not by chance, by design. She rented a home. Looked for work. Watched from the shadows. In February 2008, she returned from Germany. Days later, she sent Tor a final message. What it said, the police never released. But shortly after, the murders happened. And now, all eyes were on Christina. The timeline fit. Her mental health history raised alarms. But they still had no physical evidence. No fingerprints. No murder weapon. Nothing to hold her on. Yet the horror of what she might have done clung to the case like frostbite. The children. Their tiny bodies. The brutality. The silence of the scene. The cold intelligence behind it all. Emma lingered between life and death. Saga, the only possible witness, still unconscious. And somewhere out there, if not Christina, then someone just as monstrous was walking free. The investigators didn't sleep. Not really. They chased every lead, circled every shadow, but the case refused to let itself be solved. And the town, once peaceful, now lay blanketed in fear. Lights stayed on at night. Doors bolted. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter. Because if Christina wasn't the killer, then the real one had vanished into the dark. And killers, when they disappear, usually do so for one reason: they're waiting to come back. Tor never imagined the past would claw its way back into his life with such cruelty. He was settled now, living peacefully with Emma, sharing a quiet life with her and her 2 children in their new home. Everything felt stable. Until Christina called. It started innocently enough. A call. A voice from another time. Christina, someone he had known, but never truly understood. She spoke in riddles, wrapped in an eerie calm that didn't quite sit right. She told him she'd given birth to his son, something Tor had never been told, never even suspected. She'd given the child up for adoption, she said, because her mental health had been unraveling. The news dropped like ice water down his spine. Tor was stunned. He hadn't even known she was pregnant. Christina claimed she'd been on a business trip to Germany when the child was born. Now, she said, the boy might have a serious genetic blood disorder, and the adoptive parents might reach out to Tor, if the doctors confirmed it. That was the reason she was telling him all this, she claimed. But something about her story didn't fit. The more she talked, the more twisted the tale became. Emma, ever the realist, was skeptical from the start. She asked the logical question: what hospital had the child been born in? Christina dodged it. Couldn't name it. Said she didn't remember. Emma didn't buy it. Neither did Tor, really. But then, a stranger called. A man claiming to be the adoptive father. He confirmed everything Christina had said. He told Tor that he was, indeed, the biological father. Still, the whole thing felt like a performance. Too rehearsed. Too convenient. It was as if Christina had staged it all, orchestrated this bizarre play in an attempt to wedge herself back into Tor's life. Things spiraled quickly from strange to sinister. Not long after, police were called to Emma's home. She and her 2 children had been attacked. The children didn't survive. Emma clung to life by a thread. The brutality of the scene shook even the most seasoned investigators. Christina's name surfaced almost immediately. She had been spotted near the house on the day of the murder. And shortly after the attack, she vanished, fled back to Germany. That timing couldn't be ignored. Authorities in Sweden and Germany began working together. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. News outlets exploded with headlines, "Woman wanted in triple attack found in Hanover." When Christina's family heard, they were shocked. Her mother and brother pleaded with police for answers. Why was Christina a suspect? What could she possibly have done? Christina, playing the part of the confused and innocent woman, called the authorities herself. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding. But the police weren't buying it. She was arrested the same day. Her attorney found a technical error in the warrant, and she was briefly released. But it didn't last. Within 24 hours, she was back in custody. During questioning, Christina stuck to her story, she was innocent. But the police were just getting started. They searched her apartment. They took her laptop, her phone, the clothing she had worn on the day of the murders. Christina told them she had been wearing a beige jacket that day. Witnesses swore it was black. A black jacket was found, spotless. No blood, no evidence. It was either a different one, or had been meticulously cleaned. But the real horror hid inside her laptop. There were photos of Emma. Of her children. Of the house. Blueprints, even. She had studied the layout. She had scoured Tor's social media. Her obsession with him was deep, consuming, dangerous. Then they found her journal, entries full of venom and fixation. She had written down addresses. Daily routines. She wasn't just watching them. She was planning. Days before the murders, she had researched ways to destroy evidence. Hide blood. Disappear without a trace. And then, something miraculous happened. Emma woke up. She had survived the attack, though her mind was fractured. Doctors were careful with her. They didn't mention her children. They tiptoed around her trauma, hoping her memory would return on its own. When she finally met with police, she was disoriented. She couldn't understand their questions. Couldn't even remember why she was in the hospital. Each day she asked about her children. And each day, they told her little or nothing. Until finally, the truth began to break through, she realized they were gone. Her babies. Her life. But she still couldn't remember what had happened. Police had no DNA. No fingerprints. Christina had staged the scene too well. No murder weapon had been recovered either. But then, a small clue emerged. Christina's roommate mentioned a hammer missing from her toolbox. One that fit the description of the weapon used in the attack. It wasn't enough to convict her, but the walls were closing in. Then came the shoe prints. Crime scene investigators had catalogued every footprint. They eliminated the victims. The paramedics. Tor. One set remained. Sneakers. Not worn by any of the family. Police traced the brand and size, and they matched the shoes Christina had been seen wearing in a photo on her personal blog. Still circumstantial, but damning. The final nail came from the train station. Surveillance footage placed Christina in the city 3 times in the week leading up to the attack. The last time, the day of the murder. Grainy footage captured her walking, wearing a dark jacket, face set with purpose. She had come. She had planned. And she had struck. But even with all this, the horror was incomplete. Because Emma, the only living witness, couldn't remember the moment her world was ripped apart. And Christina, the woman at the center of it all, remained a ghost in the system, lurking in the shadows between madness and malevolence. A mother mourned children she couldn't remember losing. A man watched the past destroy the future he was building. And somewhere in the dark recesses of a twisted mind, Christina waited. Unblinking. Unapologetic. And perhaps, still planning. Her identity wasn't a mystery for long. It was a chilling moment when the police confirmed it through the cold, unyielding data of mobile phone geolocation. The phone had betrayed her. Christina's presence in the city was no accident, no coincidence. When questioned, Christina's answers were shaky, vague, filled with hesitation. She struggled to explain why she was there. At first, she claimed it was all work-related, just a business trip, nothing more. But the truth was darker, buried deep beneath layers of jealousy and obsession. Inside her computer, the police found haunting notes, ramblings fueled by an intense, destructive envy toward Emma. Christina's mind was trapped in a toxic spiral. She couldn't accept that Tor, the man she had once loved or thought she had a claim to, had found happiness with someone else. It gnawed at her, poisoning her thoughts until they twisted into something dangerous. A psychological examination later showed she was sane, frighteningly so. The darkness in her mind wasn't madness but a cold, calculated cruelty. Meanwhile, Emma was fighting to piece her life back together. Miraculously, she had survived the brutal attack. But the trauma clouded her memory, swallowing whole the night's horrific events. The police, desperate to help her, accompanied her to the crime scene, hoping it might unlock the shattered fragments of her mind. But the house, once a safe haven, remained silent, its horrors hidden behind locked doors of forgotten memory. Then, days later, a breakthrough. Emma's memory stirred in the quiet hours of night. She remembered. The knock at the door. The dark figure in a hooded jacket standing ominously in the dim light. The name, Christina. And then the sudden, terrifying blow to her head. What followed inside that house was a nightmare that no child should ever endure. Defenseless and helpless, they faced the unimaginable. The house echoed with screams that still haunted the walls. On a cold morning in July 2008, Christina Schur stood in a Swedish courtroom, her fate hanging by a fragile thread. Charged with double murder and attempted murder, the weight of the evidence pressed heavily against her. But her defense clung to hope, insisting the case was built on circumstantial evidence, flimsy and easy to tear apart. Yet Christina's behavior in court unnerved everyone. Smiling and waving inappropriately, her chilling calmness painted her as cruel, a woman unbothered by the lives shattered by her hands. She repeated her story, a visit for work, nothing more. The prosecution tore this apart, revealing visits on March 12 and 14, days before the attack, when Christina had apparently been scoping out her victims. Her lies stretched beyond the crime. She claimed to have children, to be a mother, but no one believed her. No records, no witnesses, no trace of pregnancy or birth. A web of deceit spun tighter and tighter, unraveling her credibility. Emma's testimony became the keystone of the trial. The moment she identified Christina in the courtroom, shock overwhelmed her. She fainted, overcome by the sight of the woman who had destroyed her family. This reaction was more than emotion, it was a raw, unfiltered truth. Emma had never met Christina before, had never heard details about the suspect. Her reaction confirmed the prosecution's case in a way no other evidence could. The defense argued tirelessly, no fingerprints on the murder weapon, no DNA linking Christina to the scene. But the prosecution pointed to blurry surveillance footage and a single sneaker print, evidence that the investigation believed had been accidentally compromised by doctors. Witnesses placed Christina near Emma's house, her presence undeniable despite her silence. Worse still, Christina's internet history told a dark tale, searches related to covering up evidence, photographs of Emma and her children, even a detailed diagram of Emma's house. These digital footprints painted a terrifying picture of obsession and premeditation. On August 26, the jury's decision was unanimous. Christina Schur was found guilty of double murder and attempted murder. Life in prison without parole was her sentence. The court also ordered her to pay damages to Emma, a small compensation for unimaginable loss. Her defense team appealed immediately, but the appeal was rejected. Christina was eventually transferred to a women's prison in Germany, where she continues to deny everything, desperately seeking to overturn her conviction. Meanwhile, Emma fights a different battle, healing from wounds that time cannot erase, supported by Tor, who stood by her through every dark moment. Together, they found light again, marrying and building a new life with 2 children. There's a darkness in small towns, an unsettling stillness that hides the worst of human nature. And sometimes, behind familiar faces and polite smiles, there lurks a shadow of something far more sinister, jealousy, obsession, and cold-blooded cruelty, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the sprawling shadows of a large New York City, where the cold wind seemed to carry whispers of forgotten secrets, Dan had spent 11 years as a missionary, quietly weaving his life into the fabric of the city's relentless rhythm. It was a place where hope and despair lived side by side, and Dan's faith was his anchor amidst the chaos. Several months after Dan settled, fate brought Matthew into the picture, a young man whose life was about to twist in ways he could never imagine. At university, Matthew met Mary, a quiet yet captivating student. She was a year older, her demeanor soft and unassuming, but beneath that modest exterior lay a story tangled with shadows. Their connection was swift, almost electric, and soon they were inseparable. Just 3 months in, Mary announced to her parents she wanted them to meet Matthew. It was a meeting that seemed harmless at first. Matthew won over her devout, deeply religious family, impressing them with his manners and respect. They gave their blessing, sealing a bond that felt destined but carried undercurrents no one dared to speak aloud. 6 months later, Matthew proposed. Mary said yes. Their wedding day, April 20th, 1994, was shrouded in an eerie calm, as if the air itself held its breath. Mary Freeman's story began years earlier, in 1973, born as the eldest child into a family devoted to their faith. The Freemans lived under the strict watch of the Church of Christ, where Mary's father was pastor, an imposing man whose piety was both a shield and a prison. Their family was marked by quiet suffering. Mary's younger sister, Patricia, was born with cerebral palsy and severe developmental disabilities, struggles that tested the family's limits and resilience. Yet, despite Patricia's challenges, the sisters shared a fragile, tender bond. Mary, always calm and reserved, often spent nights comforting Patricia, their whispered prayers mingling with the shadows of their shared room. When Mary was still just a child in elementary school, the family adopted a little girl named Shauna, torn from a chaotic household with siblings scattered across foster families. But the fragile illusion of safety shattered. Eventually, all the children were sent back to their biological parents. Darkness seemed to cling to Mary's life like a stubborn fog. On a cold April day in 1987, tragedy struck when her younger sister died suddenly from a heart attack in the bathtub. Mary was only 11. The trauma was a jagged wound that never healed. At 13, desperate for relief, she reached out to a school psychologist, hoping for understanding and comfort. But her father, rigid in his belief that family matters should stay private, forbade the intervention. This rejection left Mary adrift, alone with the swirling shadows of grief and fear. Over time, she spiraled into a maze of post-traumatic stress and silent suffering. The family's story grew more complicated with the adoption of Shannon and her siblings, turning their household into a crowded, volatile mix of personalities and demands. Mary, as the eldest, bore the weight of caretaking, shielding her mother and guiding the younger children, but the pressure crushed parts of her spirit. Then, Matthew appeared, young, hopeful, and soon caught in the gravity of Mary's world. Their romance flourished in stolen moments, skipping school and dreaming of a future together. But when Mary became pregnant, reality tightened its grip. They dropped out, married, and moved to a cramped apartment near Mary's parents. Matthew found work at a construction site, but the physical toil was only the surface of deeper strains. Exhaustion and resentment grew like poison in his veins. He blamed Mary for the life they led, far from the carefree existence his friends enjoyed. As the years wore on, Matthew's frustrations turned into anger, and his anger found its target in Mary. The man who once impressed her family became distant, harsh, sometimes violent. Mary's world darkened further when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Despite treatments at a specialist clinic, she passed away in April 1999, leaving a hollow ache that swallowed the family whole. Mary's father was left alone to care for the brood, and Mary, burdened with pregnancy and her own children, found herself stretched thin, trying to be everything to everyone. In June that year, the family sought refuge in a new home, a small, unfinished house in Pilgrim, a quiet town of just 2,000 souls. Matthew took a job as a pastor at the local church, a role he hoped would bring peace, but the pressures only mounted. Mary's postpartum depression crept in like a shadowy specter. Between caring for her children and managing her demanding foster siblings, she withdrew, the walls closing in. Her mood swings unnerved Matthew, and their marriage frayed at the edges. Then came the whispers. Mary spoke of violence, of cruelty cloaked in intimacy. Matthew refused to see his own darkness, blaming Mary's rigidity for their conflicts. Fear drove Mary to seek safety with her brothers, a temporary shield against the storm inside her home. In time, Matthew insisted they distance themselves from her family's influence. They moved away, to a small town called Menville, hoping the change would heal their fractured lives. Mary was pregnant again and dared to dream of a large family like the one she'd lost. But the shadows lingered, lurking just beyond the light. Mary suffered a miscarriage, the loss deepening the cracks in her fragile hope. The story of Mary and Matthew is one painted in muted colors: faith, love, grief, and a creeping darkness beneath the surface, waiting to unravel everything they tried to hold together. In the quiet towns and worn-out apartments, the echoes of their past traumas whispered, unseen but ever-present, as if warning that some wounds never truly heal. The Matthews seemed like the perfect family to the outside world. Their new neighbors welcomed them with open arms, charmed by Matthew's booming career as a pastor. His reputation in town was stellar, a man of faith, respected and admired. But behind closed doors, the picture was darker, far from what anyone could imagine. Matthew's work demanded a lot of travel. Weeks away from home were common, leaving Mary to manage the household and their 3 daughters alone. She took a part-time job to help make ends meet, while Matthew also taught Bible lessons at Boyd Christian School. In the eyes of the community, he was a pillar of morality, a steady influence shaping young minds with his religious teachings. Yet those who worked closely with him knew there was a cold edge to his personality. Arrogance simmered beneath his pious exterior, tensions rising whenever he entered the office. Mary, ever devoted, brought him lunch daily, trying to hold their world together, but Matthew met her kindness with contempt. His secretary noticed it too, the harshness in a man who preached love but treated his own wife like a burden. No one suspected the violence that unfolded when the doors were closed. Mary bore bruises in silence, hiding the truth behind forced smiles and vague explanations. One day, a black eye appeared, too obvious to ignore. The whispers began. Rumors of abuse spread quietly through the town, dark suspicions of physical harm, of a man spiraling beneath the surface, trapped in his own demons, perhaps fueled by addiction no one dared speak of openly. In 2004, the inevitable happened. Matthew lost his pastoral position, replaced by a preacher with a cleaner reputation. The community that once praised him now turned away, leaving Matthew desperate and enraged. The family packed up and moved, seeking a fresh start in a new city. At first, things seemed to improve. Matthew found work at another local church, and Mary was expecting another child. But the shadows that followed them refused to lift. Tension soon erupted with the neighbors over a dog, a simple conflict spiraling into threats and hostility. Mary, protective and fearful, even threatened to shoot the animal to keep her children safe. The fragile peace was broken. At his new church, Matthew played a different role. Polite, caring, a devoted husband and father on the surface. The community admired them, unaware of the cracks beneath. Brett Glenn, a close family friend, stood by them, offering support. One day, at a wedding anniversary, Matthew noticed Brett's family had a pistol for protection. An idea took root: the Matthews should have one too. He took Mary to a shooting range, teaching her how to handle a gun. It was supposed to be a sign of safety, but soon it felt like a symbol of something darker creeping into their lives. Meanwhile, Mary tried to rebuild her own life. After the birth of their child, she enrolled in a teacher training program, hoping to work with sick children. But trouble found her. On December 1, 2005, she received a check, a supposed lottery prize. Desperate to pay her insurance, she took out loans, believing the windfall would cover the debt. But the check was fake. The prize, a cruel illusion. With mounting pressure, Mary's actions grew reckless. She tried to cash in on the scam, hoping to secure $6,500 through a naive plan of fraud. The banks caught on. By February 2006, her transactions were flagged and declined. She shifted addresses, opened new accounts using only a phone number and rented mailbox, attempting to conceal her actions. She even tried to withdraw $7,000 from accounts with mere pennies inside, dodging questions and warnings. All the while, Matthew remained oblivious, congratulated by his father for their apparent financial recovery. The compensation from an earlier accident seemed to smooth over their debts, but beneath the surface, Mary's desperate fraud was tightening a noose around their family. Bank officials warned her repeatedly: failure to resolve the issue would lead to criminal charges. They offered loans to cover the gaps, but Mary refused to involve Matthew, choosing silence over truth. Then, March 22, 2006, came like a thunderclap. The Matthews were expected at church, as always, to join their parishioners. Their 3 daughters were supposed to attend alongside other children. But the family never arrived. Whispers rippled through the congregation. A pastor's family missing on such a significant day was unheard of. The elder called their home, no answer. Matthew was scheduled to deliver a crucial sermon, a moment the community had been anticipating. Suspicion grew, a cold unease settling over the church pews. Something had shattered the facade. Something dark and terrible had taken hold.